and then literally drag the start point. Right, next I'm going to show you how to make a preloader, and this can be quite complicated, so I'll try and do this in the maximum detail. We've covered publishing at the start, but bear in mind if you save a flash file on Flash 8 and your friend has Flash 2004 for instance, he won't be able to open the file. The files are version specific in the same way a person whose Flash player is outdated won't be able to view current Shockwave Flash versions. Bear in mind they can always open with Explorer or Safari. I'd also like to mention, if you've got two symbols in the same layer and you're trying to create a motion tween, it won't work quite as you expect. You can see that moves in the way it would if it was just one symbol, but if you look in the library you can see it's had to create tweens for the keyframes because they're actually separate symbols, so they should be in their own separate layers. So these tweens, they're basically like comps or recs of the actual symbols within this tween. So you know, you don't want that shit there. Okay, ActionScript is basically Flash coding. The majority of people will never have to use ActionScript, and they should be happy about that because it can get very complicated. I started making a Streets of Rage style scrolling beat 'em up called Streets of AIDS, and even got as far as programming artificial intelligence, but when I got to making a player damage system, the whole project went under. You'll probably use ActionScript or AS2, and it's AS2 in most cases, if you want to make your own preloader or scene selector. Bear in mind that there are a lot of preloaders that are already made for you on the internet on sites such as newgrounds.com under the tutorials section, and you can download them and implement them without any hassle. But for those who want a basic understanding, I'll now cover some of the common controllers. The first thing to understand is that if you've been using scenes in your project, it can be hard to refer to a specific frame. On the properties menu, when you select a frame, you can label the frame. So if I click on frame 6, you'll see on the properties here it says frame label. So I could give that a name like 666. It's best to go with a word though. And if I insert frames here, you can see that it's actually labelled that keyframe with a flag, so it can easily refer to that in ActionScript just by typing, I think it's a small apostrophe like that, and then 6, and then close. So if I wanted to play a specific frame label, that's how I'd refer to it. So it'd be play frame and then that. So it's good for like player systems, for instance, if they've got different states such as still, walking, jumping, whatever. You might flag and label a death scene or something to refer to that point in ActionScript. In the majority of instances, you can actually refer to a specific frame number. So if I had 200 frames in scene 1, which is scene 1, it tells me that's the scene I'm in there. You could use window, other panels, scene to actually see the scenes you've got going on, and also add scenes or delete whole scenes. So if I had 200 frames in scene 1 and 40 frames in scene 2, and I wanted to refer to the last frame of scene 2, I wouldn't bother with scene 2 frame 40, especially if you've been renaming your scenes You know, I might call this scene preloader, and then scene 1 might be called the main movie, for instance. So what I'd do is I'd refer to the frame as frame 240, so it's a global value, i.e. I've added the 200 frames in scene 1 and the 40 frames in scene 2. If you actually look on your publish settings, file, publish settings, we actually covered this at the start of the tutorial, but I always work with ActionScript 2 or AS2. Right, the first sets of code control how the movie is played, and they're under global functions, and these are called timeline control. So if you click window and then go down to actions, which I think has a shortcut for F9, then you'll see this window here, and this is your ActionScript window. And you can see on the left here we've got global functions and then timeline control, and you should be familiar with some of these if you've ever used a DVD player, for instance. You've got go to and play, go to and stop, next frame, next scene, play, previous frame, previous scene, stop, stop all sounds. So it's kind of like your navigational controls. You'll also see at the top right script assist, and if you've got all your code typed on this main window here, you can use script assist to actually check everything you've done, and it also rearranges it in a more clean format, basically. The code play, if I double click that, this will basically play from this point where I've got ActionScript in keyframe 1. It'll basically play indefinitely, but you don't actually need that because Flash actually plays automatically. Stop basically does the opposite, or we can give a specific action such as go to and play a specific frame, go to and stop a specific frame. So it's also useful for movie clip control. If you had a movie clip with animation within it in your library, you could refer to specific keyframes into it. So it could go to specific points, such as, say you shot maybe 5 enemies and you wanted it to progress to the next level, then you could have an action somewhere along the lines of if frame whatever is reached, tell target, and then target is basically your movie clip, so whatever your movie clip is labelled as, and then go to and play whatever frame. But we're not actually going to go over movie clip control, we're just going to stick to doing a preloader. We'll keep everything very basic here. So if you create a new scene on your scene other window called preloader or whatever you want to call it, I'm just going to work in scene 1 and imagine that scene 2 is my movie. And at the actual start of your timeline, you basically want some sort of looping animation that checks if your movie is finished loading. And when I say finish loading, I basically mean if your computer has downloaded it to your temporary internet files. So I'm just going to have some simple text. And then I'm just going to break that apart. And then at this point, I'm just going to bring these dots back to give the impression of movement. Kind of like if the cursor changes to a a different symbol like it's loading something. And note that these keyframes were identical, so I could insert a keyframe on the actual frame and then it just copied it. So you can see there it's got a simple animation of the dots just decreasing and increasing. So basically that's my looping section done. So I might want to call that loop or whatever. And then I'm going to create a new layer called AS for ActionScript. And I also need a layer for a button. And the button that we're going to make is basically going to allow you to play the movie once it's finished loading. And we're going to stop in this frame with the button in once it's finished, because then if people have been waiting for this thing to play, they can just come along and press the play button whenever they're ready to start watching it. I always